Hey everyone, Jess McCarthy here. With me today is Gordon McNeill, who for years led one of the most elite private high schools in America called Sage Hill, and which is literally on a big hill overlooking multi-million dollar homes in sunny Newport Beach, California. Sage is a very difficult school to get into, and that's not only financially. The tuition, I think, when I look at it, it's about $50,000 a year, but also it's difficult admissions wise. It's just super, super selective. I first met Gordon well over a decade ago. It's probably in the middle of his 20 years at Sage Hill. So he was there a long time. He was a dean of students, then head of school, and then finally he was the president there. Back then, I myself was working at a nearby private middle school, and that's how he and I connected. Because Gordon was before Sage a teacher, and so was I for years. And though again, both of us loved working with students, we each in our own way kind of started to depart from the traditional school system that we were in at the time. Personally, I've become convinced the value of Montessori. So that's in education, parenting, really just in life. And then Gordon has made his way into non-traditional educational endeavors as well, such as it was a Tiger Woods Foundation, and he was serving under Tiger Woods himself. The conversation he and I have today, and this is as both parents and longtime educators, is really about, I would say, approaching schooling differently. And that's questioning assumptions that many of us have, and maybe that, we carry over from when we were students ourselves. So that's kind of the background I got for you, simple to our chat. And now let's get to it. So, Gordon McNeill, thank you so much for hopping on. It's good to see you. Good to have you on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, usually with this show, I like to hop into just right into some good stuff. So, or maybe some bad stuff. We'll see what happens. But in your experience, you have years and years working with teenagers in particular. Anything hop out as one of those kind of standout situations, whether it was something that was really, really an amazing experience or something negative where you learned something from it pretty deep, you think the audience could gain from?
And maybe I'll give you one that's good and bad. All right. And then you can kind of look
Yeah,
at it.
sure.
So I was at this local high school, public high school, and I heard about this new private school opening up. And I thought, you know what? It feels like we're doing really good work in the classroom. But when I go on to campus and I see what's happening at lunchtime and in the hallways, it seems like it all falls apart because the school is just so massive that any good work you do in the classroom kind of gets brought back to the common denominator, whatever that may be, good, bad, or otherwise. And so this new school was opened up and they had a position to be the dean of students to really affect student culture, really talk about how you work with students and get them to feel part of the community. And after several interviews, I convinced this place that I'm your guy. And so the summer before the school, it was the second year the school had been open. That summer before, I wasn't even on the payroll yet, but I'm excited. I'm young. I'm probably 29 or 30 at the time. A lot of energy, and I go and I devour like 20 different high school handbooks. Like what are the rules, what are the policies, and I spend a lot of hours and I bring it into this to the office. I put together this rule book, and it was the biggest mistake I made. Meaning like you're gonna come in and basically you're gonna have 500 students and you're gonna hold them accountable to 80 rules, 100 rules, whatever those things are. And you can imagine what the rules are. If you're tardy 3 times, this happens. If you don't turn up your homework in, this is going to be your grade.
Yeah.
If you're on campus and you're using foul language, this is what's going to happen to you. You're going to have a very traditional, and I only got that from the handbooks I saw and then my
Yeah.
own experience as a student in a school. That's, basically avoid
Yeah.
getting in trouble, right? So I worked with that for about 2 years. And at the end of each year, I'm making all these adjustments because, the kids and the parents found all the loopholes in each one of them.
Of
So I'm
course.
tightening up this document, what started with 80 pages. Now it's 100 pages. Then it's 120 pages. And I see where this is going. And I remember walking into the head of school's office and I said, look, if you're okay with it and if you trust me, I'm going to do kind of what my parents did with me. And instead of having rules, we're going to shift it and have expectations. And if you're okay with it, I'd love to put together a student honor council and really have the students help me draft, what are the expectations and what does it mean to be honorable in a school environment. And so the good of the whole situation was the first 2 or 3 years of that school's history were painful for me as a dean of students because I was chasing kids and holding them accountable to rules. And I didn't even feel good about enforcing them. It just felt
Yeah.
horrible. We shifted and went to expectations. And it was rough at first because the teachers had a hard time with it. Teachers were used to having rules in the classroom, right?
Yeah. Clarity.
But I thought back to my middle school days, and I never had rules in the classroom. When some kid stood up in the middle of a lesson, I would say, "Hey, Johnny, I'm so glad you stood up right now. So let's talk about that situation. I'm in the middle of doing this, what should you be doing right now?" And, the
Mm,
kid would say, "Well, yeah, I guess it probably wasn't smart for me to get up." And I'm like, brilliant. And he would go sit back down, right?
mm,
So I was never really setting rules, but I was setting expectations without even knowing I was doing it as a
mm.
young teacher, right? With not too much experience. And that's what my parents did for me. There were very few rules in my house, as a kid, but I knew when I did something wrong
Yeah.
because the expectation was that I would behave, I would be, doing the right thing, I would show up on time, I would do the dishes, whatever it was. But I never heard my mom saying, if you don't do the dishes, this is what's going to happen to you. I never
Yeah.
heard
That's
that.
what he
I
said.
just heard this is the expectation. So that's kind of a personal experience that kind of cuts both ways. The bad of it is trying to hold kids accountable to rules, like a bunch of them. And the good of it is, well, wait a second, let's get rid of that and let's put down expectations. And literally, we wrote, this is what it means to be honorable. We tried to define it.
Mhm.
We literally said, um, this is a living, breathing document because what honorable means to this group of students may be slightly different than this group, may be slightly different to this student. And by the
Interesting.
way, across a school, each teacher may have different lines, right? So, as young people, the goal is for you to kind of figure out what environment you're in. You influence it a little bit, but so do the other people in that room. And then you have to kind of adjust to I'm going to call it the norm. That may be the wrong
Mhm.
word, but adjust to, what's happening there. So being honorable took on this flexibility. And then we had a signing ceremony where kids could sign the honor code, but they didn't have to. And that was a big controversial thing because we're like, well,
I
if
want to
they don't
force
feel
that, huh?
like, yeah, if we enforce them being honorable, then that's another rule, right? We were thinking a
Mm.
little too much, but it came it came together nicely. And then moving forward, I always felt like I had rapport with the student. There was expectations that we were talking about. There were things we were working on together as opposed to me
Yeah.
enforcing rules. And it got the
Yeah.
culture of the school shifted.
So it's wild. There's so many things that come to mind when you're talking about this, but one is that it seems like you kind of came in and you don't really know what you're supposed to do, right? You're new at this role, but it seems very intellectual. Like we take all the old stuff, we put it together, and then we're gonna make something new and then put it onto these kids. And I wonder how much of it is like I gotta be in control when I get in there. I gotta know, it's gotta be clear cut. I mean, do you think there was an element of this is going to help me to function? And it's not thinking yet about the children as such, but more of like, how am I going to be able to function in this environment? Like, what do you think your perspective coming in was by doing that? I mean, it's a pretty normal approach. It's probably the same approach I would have taken. But what do you think was going on there?
I think there was probably two or three things. I think one of them, you're right. I think wasn't I never really thought of in terms of being in control, like that wasn't
Yeah.
conscious, but I did think this makes the line clear, and
Yeah.
therefore I can establish what I demand or what I expect, right? Which sounds like I'm controlling, right? So that
Yeah.
word never popped in my mind, but it was a control issue looking back on it. I think that's first and foremost. I think secondarily is, and it's one of the big crises we have in schools, is that we tend to replicate what we did.
Yeah.
what we experienced. And the hardest part about being a teacher, for all the teachers out there listening to this, is most of the parents you deal with feel like they're experts in education. They went K to 12, most of them. Many of them went beyond that 4 years, and many of them, God forbid, went even 4 more years beyond that.
Yeah.
And so they have some expertise, and they're not wrong. They do have some expertise to us. They've seen, 50 teachers, 100 teachers in that whole lifespan. So
Yeah.
they've seen a lot of modeling. They kind of know what they like and don't like. And then so I was just basically saying, taking what I knew and regurgitating it as a student. The big shift was I made it more like how I was raised in a
Yeah.
family, and that's a big shift. But yeah, super tricky. I think those are the two reasons why I came up with a rules based approach.
And do you see like it seems like you had this natural start movement towards including the students into that planning. Like, wait, I'm going to make these rules from on high and just push them down onto these kids versus, well, let's talk with these guys and see what they're thinking about all this, not in some kind of wishy-washy anything goes, but if kind of like they're going to be out in society. I mean, once they graduate from your high school, I mean, they can go to college or they're still adults, or they go off and do
Right.
work, they're adults. So is there, how did that transformation of like, we're the adults, we set the rules, we tell them exactly what they're going to do, to, hey, maybe we include these guys and gals into this process of creating expectations, as you're saying?
Yeah, I subconsciously stole it from another part of our school, and I didn't even know it until I reflected back on it. We had a service learning program at the school, and sometimes those are a lot of words. We're going to do service learning, but all kids are just walking into a food bank and moving food around for the day. Then they come home, and there's
Yeah.
really, maybe some learning. I don't know. But those were some of our projects, the ninth and the 10th graders. But as the kids got older, they had more agency to either choose from a menu of things that we had already, partnered with, or create their own.
Yeah.
And the create their own were always either extraordinarily good or they crashed and burned, right?
Yeah.
And we had to put, I was watching one of the Montessori videos you had put together, basically around what is Montessori. And you said something along the lines of, and you'll be able to quote this better than me, but it's freedom within boundaries.
Yeah.
You said it differently, the Montessori
Freedom within
language,
limits,
but
but it's the same. Yeah.
freedom
That's basically
freedom
it.
within limits, right?
Yeah.
And over time, that's all we adjusted at the school. Is we said you can choose, but here's the frame that you can work within. You
Yeah.
can choose your own thing, you can build it, but you've got to hit at least these things, and it's got to have these elements, right?
Hmm.
And once we did that, more often than not, they were successful. You still had kids who look at service, they're like, why am I doing this? I just need an A in English, let me move on. That's
Yeah.
never going to change in the world. But for most of the kids, most of the time, that little bit of agency took, maybe good service work and made it extraordinary. Just that little bit of agency. It wasn't much.
Yeah.
And then, if a kid does that and they have some success, even if they fail, but if they work at it and fail, that's
Mm.
okay too. But their confidence level goes through the roof, and
Yeah.
they feel like, they can accomplish anything. I had never seen that video until you shared it with me a few weeks back. And that little guy, or the little young lady, putting the dishes out.
Oh
I mean, you
yeah.
could
It's
just
insane.
brimming with confidence, like
Yeah.
top to bottom, right? And now that kid's going to go on to the next thing and scaffold it, right? Build from there.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
don't give kids chances to do that. We always tell them what to do.
Yeah.
It's a
That's, I
problem.
mean, but it is so difficult when you do the kind of transition from a more traditional viewpoint to this kind of, hey, we really do need to give them agency, as you're talking about, allow for that sense of independence. You hear my kid in the back?
Yeah,
Can
that's
you
great.
hear? Can you hear him?
Yeah, yeah, a
It's
little bit.
so funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're recording
Hey,
late, so he's
well, this is good though, right? Like,
it's the
you and I are
reality.
also, yeah, we're Montessori
Dads.
students too. Like, we're working within the confines of what we have, and yeah, here we
I
go.
know. It's so funny. But even, I mean, think about like, even Ragnar, who's my son here, he's 10 months, but because a lot of people say if you don't start early, you really have difficulties later. And I know there's Montessorians that say if you don't do this, then I mean, put it bluntly, kind of screwed later on. That's not my view, but I know that you being in high school, it's a much, or when you were in high school, it's a much more challenging situation to help. Like the girl you were talking about was 2 years old, putting dishes out on the table, setting the table for a class. But if you've got somebody that's gone through kind of a system of I'm telling you what to do and you do it, even if it's nice, like we're kind guys, but we're saying it like, hey, here's the question, you answer it, I'll give you a grade. And they've had that day after day, week after week, month, year after year. And then they get into high school. And now you're kind of transforming, like, hey, want to give you guys some more agency. I mean, what do you think about this? How do people that have been in the system, particularly at say Sage Hill back then, this is the cream of the crop. This is, I've hit all the check marks and now I'm in that stage of the great high school so I can go on to the great college, but they still might be just checking boxes off. How do you help them to go beyond that and kind of create their own boxes? Yeah.
Yeah, you've hit on maybe 20 topics we could spend a whole podcast on.
Yeah.
So look, the Sage Hill, great school, they do great work. So let me start with that. I think the approach that the school has always been the right one around agency and other things. And there's always been a dilemma at that school, which is we're a college prep school. And so the expectation for parents coming in is that, with exception,
Mm.
that their kid's going to go off to a 4-year college, right? All right. So that's the first thing. And by the way, it would be nice if it's one of the top 20 4-year colleges. And really, there's 5 of them that we're really interested in, right? And
Yeah.
so, like,
Yeah.
you're already stacking the deck against the kid, starting off, because even if they're perfect, they may not get into one of those. But let's move beyond that.
And
So,
Gordon, even if they get in, is that really what they want?
well,
So
that's
it's even
right.
beyond. But yeah,
Yeah, we
yeah,
would see some of that too. A kid, at the pinnacle, then they're taking a year off because of a breakdown, right?
yeah,
In
yeah.
situations like that. That was rare, but you would see it. And so, look, at Sage Hill, we had to hit 2 things. If I really had my way, I would have looked parents in the eye and said, "You have 4 years here. Here are the basic requirements. A couple years of English, couple years of math, couple years of history." And then we want your kid to just explore. Here are all
Yeah.
these cool courses, things that might spark their interest. That wouldn't work at that school. And the reason why is the fear level
Yeah.
on allowing a kid to get outside the system was too great. Right now, some kids did it anyway because that's just who they were,
Yeah.
and their parents were just, yeah, go for it, everything worked out. And those kids, it all worked out.
Yeah.
It all worked out, right? But if there was an expectation for a certain outcome, then this kid who took an alternate track, and if that kid was like, well, I'm just going to do kind of what Mr. McNeill said, and then they didn't get into one of those 5 schools, there
Yeah.
would be all hell to pay, right, from the parent.
Yeah. It's blame.
Yeah, so it's so super tricky. So what Sage Hill did, and it took a little while for us to get to it, is you have your core curriculum, you have kids that are hustling for the APs and the honors. Always within that, there were kids who would take their own path and do their own thing. Love those kids. Love the AP kids too. Like some of them, that's who they were, and that's exactly what they should have done. We tried to create opportunities where you could explore without consequence. So service learning, you can explore, do different things. The consequence is it either worked or it failed, but it's not going to have a great impact on you,
Yeah.
right? And so that'd be a primary example. We went to almost like an intersession. So at the end of the school year in spring, we call it Spring at Sage. Kids had about 20 different seminars that they could opt into, and the seminars were very Montessori like. We're going to dive into this, get your hands dirty, and just play. Whatever it
Mm.
was, it could be the stock market, it could be building model airplanes, it could be. I led one on creating TED Talks at our school, and I gave those kids that project, and they had to apply to be an official TED site, and they had to hit all these hurdles. And all I was ever there for is a reference. What do you need? How can I help you? Oh, you need to find
Yeah.
a good speaker. Hey, call this lady, call this guy. They did it all, right? And they pulled it off. Like the level of there was no grade, no
Mhm.
reward other than you did it. Yeah,
Yeah. So
that's
I
how we
wonder,
would build it.
and then so what would happen? Like, did you ever see students that were on that track, like what you might be called like the college track versus like a life track? Like, I want to enjoy my life versus, they only see college. Like, that is the track. I mean, who knows what happens after I get into Harvard, Yale, so forth. But that's my track. Did you ever see one of those, young men or women hit that kind of like, wow, is this really what I want? Kind of like getting out of the system. I don't know. What did you put it as? Um, Stop playing the game. Did you ever see a transition?
Mm.
Because I think that's the way you put it, right? When we were
Yeah.
talking much earlier.
Well, there's a good friend of mine. His name is Toyo Shimano, and he's from that Shimano family, the family that made all the bike parts and the brakes and
Oh, nice.
the fishing rods. He's a really cool guy, and he just
Uh,
thinks so far outside the box. I love him. He was on our board at Sage Hill, and I used to just go to him and say, "Okay, give me something out there," and he
yeah.
would have it, because he just didn't think like in a linear fashion, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we had kids like that, and it could be rough because when you try to change, your junior year, you're still showing this, but you're showing that, and you're kind of in between, right?
Mm,
But if you're really concerned about your quality of life experience, the ability to, I'm not going to say pursue your passion because that can be a little overdone, but to, deeply engage in an area that you're interested in and try to build a career around it. Sometimes you got to get off the track
yeah.
and stop playing the game. So Toyo used to say, and all the parents out there, think about this for a minute. When you were in school and I was in fifth grade, I already knew who the best person at the game was. And I was never going to beat her. It was a her.
Mhm.
When I was in 11th grade, I remember who the best person at the game was, and I was not going to beat her. She had already won the game. She was so good at it, she won. Like, I'm not going to compete. Yet, that's the only thing I knew. So I tried to compete, and I was miserable in those classes. I didn't want to take AP English. Like, I wasn't that great a writer nor a great reader, nor did I care about the books that much at the time. I'd love to
Yeah.
take it now, but at the time, yet here I am taking that class when I could have taken a second woodshop course
Yeah.
or a metal shop course or lighten my load here and pursued sports a little bit deeper, but instead I'm sitting there, crying at night because I got to
Yeah.
write an essay that I'm not capable of writing, right? So yeah, playing the game, and we already know who's going to win it, yet everybody
Yeah.
tries to compete in that game. So why wouldn't you change the game?
Yeah. And I mean, what's crazy is just listening to you talk too, is it is a weird perspective when we step back and think, as adults, those of us who actually enjoy the work we do, would you ever put up with a good portion of your day, let's say 75%, because I don't know what percentage of normal students actually enjoy their classes. Let's say 75% they don't enjoy, even
Yeah,
50% they don't enjoy. Would you
yeah,
put up with 50% of your day that you dislike? And you're trying your hardest. And as you said, at some of those courses, maybe oh, there's no way I'm gonna get an A here, but I need to shoot for an A because I'm not gonna get into the college I like. It's just like such a setup.
yeah,
And it's crazy to think about it with because what I'm thinking about is how do you get these students to almost like I know it's weird to say this with parents out there, but almost if you're a teenager, you're an older teenager to bypass their parents if the parents are the ones putting so much stress on them or to at least pressure up. Is it possible to really pressure up um, and do something reverse? I mean, I know I'm coming from an adult perspective now where I feel like, oh, I'd be a radical and be like, yo, mom, I don't care what you want. I'm doing
yeah,
this, you
totally.
know?
Well,
Um,
look, I think hopefully you have a school that what is willing to have those conversations. Another thing that Sage Hill does well and did well was that I was responsible for 10 kids through their 4-year journey as an advisor, and every faculty member, many staff members as well, had the same responsibility. And it's really easy to lay out a kid's course schedule for the following year. It's like, well, you're in English 2, take English 3. You're in,
Yeah.
pre-calc, take calc, and but the real juicy conversations, the ones that were the hardest were, wow, you're signing up for 4 APs next year. Let's think about this for a minute. Remember last year when you came to me and you were stressed out and you were overworked and it was too much on your plate? You had 1 AP then, now you want 4. Yeah, but I got to get into this college and that college. And then, it leads to the question, well, do you
Yeah.
have to get into that college?
Which is a
And so then you kind
crazy,
of hope
doesn't that like
you
flip your
hopefully
whole
open their eyes
mindset?
up to some other
Yeah.
options, right? And the kicker there is once they get to college, they're going to do the same thing. I've got to be at the top of my class, so I'm going to do this, this, and this. But and then when they get into corporate America, I got to climb the ladder.
Yeah.
I'm like, do you?
Yeah. Is that really and I think
So,
it's like
yeah,
when that's hammered in your head over and I know the kind of our culture is definitely changing away from that. So there's no doubt that we have a cultural trend away, but I think it's a kind of more like feeling, oh, this is what you should do. But in reality, most schools are still like, no, I gotta do this. I mean, even the idea of going to college as that is the success route. I mean, I'm not still working with older children as much, so I don't know, but I'm assuming it's still the pressure is there. Oh yeah, college is that's it. You got to go to college. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but what's your take at this point?
no, there's some shift. I mean,
Mm.
it's good news, bad news. Back in the day when college was a little more affordable, it was a great time to, take 4 years and grow and evolve and explore some courses and try to do some things that you may not do otherwise because, hey, you're going to be 21, 22. You got to work. And back then, when you worked, I mean, if you were interested in having financial success, you usually locked into a company and you stayed there for 20 or 30
Yeah,
years, maybe made one, maybe two shifts in your whole life, right? So there's been a big shift because of the gig economy, the ability to have let's call it side hustles for lack of a better term, where you can piece together a whole world if you want to. There's some difficulties around healthcare. There's some difficulties around making all of that work and filing taxes and all those things, right? But there's more option and opportunity now than there's ever been to actually establish yourself in a unique and individual way. Now, schools are still struggling with simple things like if you really want to be an engineer, is the high school you're going to helping you do that?
yeah,
Probably not. You can probably take some advanced math classes, maybe a science course, but very little, if any, engineering. If you really want to be, at the cutting edge of, computer science and really forward thinking, are schools really doing that for you, even colleges? So what's happened is the return, is not what it used to be. You're spending 100 and well, let's, I have one kid that goes to a private school, 70,000 a year times 4. Never mind all the incidentals. So let's call it 300
yeah.
grand, right? Now, let me ask you a question, and I've done this with some parents. Would If I had an 18-year-old and they were hardworking, had their head screwed on right, this my oldest does, and I said, instead of me investing 300,000 in your college, I'm going to give you $300,000 to give you that nest egg to start, and I want you to find your path forward during that time. I'm going to help you, guide you, really let you explore
Yeah,
which way is better.
yeah.
That 300,000 is gone. Like it's never coming back.
Yeah. No, I'm with you, and
you
it's fun.
know,
It's funny
and
listening
by
to
the
you
way, I
talk.
have 5 kids, Jesse. So
Yeah,
do the math.
Gordon's not like the I bet you throwing 300,000 around like, oh, if I what my choice I have. And Gordon's not, Mr. Billionaire over there just throwing $300,000 around. But yeah, it's I think it's one like you started to talk about, say somebody really wants to be an engineer. Like I think of it now in Montessori, just what these kids are capable of. Like you saw that 2-year-old fully setting the table for lunch for all the kids at 2. And then I mean there are 6-year-olds, no doubt, in many people's houses that don't take part in even making the dinner table, and that's
Yeah.
a norm. So, but what is possible at 14 if you've had every day you're making the choices, you're deciding things. Now, again, freedom within the boundaries or limits. Um, so I'm kind of leaning towards what you're saying, and I have been about you want to find something you're interested in, and by the time you're 14, me, I didn't know what I was doing at 14, and most people don't. But if you've had that kind of life of choice, instead of the teacher going, okay, now you move to your science class, now you move, and it's just, told what to do, man, by the time you're 14, you've got a lot that you can figure out. So I'm highly skeptical now of a lot of schools that think, that you're going to have 300 kids in a classroom in college and they're going to teach you something about, I don't know, psychology, history, and that's somehow you're going to gain versus really focusing on what you're passionate about by that time. Um, so I'm skeptical about the
Yeah.
colleges, but I'm also on the other end, Gordon. It's interesting you say, here's $300,000. I'm also skeptical because I know when you have money and the fire's not there under your ass, it sometimes can be damaging as well. So it's a
No,
weird,
you wouldn't give it to them. You would, dole it out over time.
a little bit.
Well,
Um,
let's talk about that a little bit because you've brought up some interesting points. My wife's a physician, and she definitely had to have a baseline of knowledge, as she was going through medical school, right? But she took off like a shot when they started doing, the fourth year, and they do rounds in each different
mm,
specialty. And then she really took off when she did her 1 year of internal medicine, and then she did 3 years of dermatology, or 2 years. And, then it was all hands on at that point,
yeah.
right? And they're bringing you in and they're saying, well, this patient came in presenting these symptoms. What do you
What do you do?
think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
fun.
so that's real, right? And so, I wonder if, I think in many cases we do already have it figured out. Medical school might have it figured out already. Now they have some
Yeah,
issues.
in the
That
very
I was at the
particular fields is what you're saying,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Well,
I agree.
even law, they'll tell you, like, everything I learned in law school did me nothing until I actually started practicing. And I would tell
Yeah.
you the same. Like, I won't say the name of the school, but I went and got my teaching credential. I didn't know a thing until I
Yeah.
started teaching.
Yeah. And I think that's at a core level, that's Montessori, is that, the hands kind of guide and develop the mind. And the real issue is in most schools, and even really quote good schools, the kids are still sitting there reading and quote thinking as if that's enough. And you just said when you're getting trained, you can talk about this stuff, but until you actually get on the ground and start getting your hands dirty, you don't know.
Yeah,
Um,
you don't.
so I wonder, it's just in thinking about basically K through 12, it's a lot of non physical. Like you raised even wood shop. And I know, I mean, I used to be the kind of guy like, why are we, having these extracurriculars? Like, we need to really focus on the core. And I think core academics are actually really important to have a base and a love of kind of history, literature. It's beautiful when it's done
Yeah,
right.
get exposed to it. Yeah,
Yeah.
understand it. Yeah.
But man, if you're not in there doing something, I mean, with like physically moving about, it's tough. It's tough. I don't know at Sage, did you guys have, were there um how much of the classrooms were they basically traditional classrooms, a lot of the topics, or what was it like?
I mean, look, at the core, a lot of them were traditional. You would have English 2, sophomore year, Grapes of Wrath, all the things that, you and I probably did, Old Quiet
Yeah,
on the
exact
Western
same
Front,
thing.
and
Easy.
um, I do believe, though, that there was a different thing going on at Sage Hill, that, the class sizes could be kept under 20, and oftentimes they hovered around 15 or 16. And, when you were reading literature, you couldn't hide in the corner, and it was a
Mhm.
discussion, and it was no different really than what you and I are doing right now. Like, we don't really have a script. We talk about a few things where we might go, and so far I'm looking at some of the things on the list. I'm like, we're at number 10 and number 2, then number 6, and then that one came out of nowhere.
That's
And
actually, yeah.
it's how it should be, right? We're
Yeah.
riffing off each other, right? You're doing something, I'm doing something, it's making me think about something. And it's also, we're showcasing, critical thinking skills, right? I don't know what you're going to grab on to what I'm saying. Yet here
Yeah.
I am, and I can take it and then go, oh, I have a thought on that. And then you go, oh, that's interesting. And we keep on bouncing around, right? Well, what if we give kids, instead of being so concerned about, you read Beowulf, I hated that one. And then, that came out of nowhere because I was like my freshman year in high
That's
school. I
like
don't know where that came
trauma.
from. Yeah,
Gordon
it was
trauma.
trauma.
We have to have a session.
Yeah. But instead of being so concerned about what works we've read, well, really the thing that we're really trying to teach is the skill. How do you critically read and understand, and then actually have a conversation about it? Because hopefully you take that with you in your career.
Mhm.
And then when I'm in a situation and there's something coming to me that I've read and I've got to apply it in my work, I can actually critically think about that and go, huh, here's how I need to discuss that with my team and actually make a step. So why aren't schools more focused on, these are the 10 skills we hope these kids have after 4 years? And if they do have those, they should be very attractive to a college.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Interesting,
you'd have
right?
you'd have a just a I mean, there are Montessori high schools, but they're very rare. But I think you'd probably have a refashioning of what high school even looked like. I mean, even thinking about, when you said you came in as the dean of students, you're taking these manuals from other schools. And I mean, you're at the top. I mean, this was a very, very expensive school that, like you were saying, 15 kids in a room. I mean, that's unheard of in most public high schools, even a lot of private high schools. um, they've got their manuals, and I mean that's a complete transformation what you did, but you were given a lot of leeway. um, just trying to think of what that transition or that kind of transformation, I guess you could kind of take a class and do it. um, but it seems pretty tough. It seems like that
Yeah.
would be within the traditional kind of framework.
Yeah.
It's really, isn't high school kind of set up in a way to get you to college? It's not to get you aid to life. It's to get you to college.
Well, yeah, if you want to go down that path, like think about what were schools originally created for in the
Mhm.
United States, right? It was to, have an educated populace that could, contribute to their community and be patriots and, loyal to the local, mayor or whatever. I don't know what it was, but like, something along those lines. Over time, we started saying, well, gosh, what are we doing with these kids? Let's make sure they can read, write, and do math. Well, let's start working in some things. Like when I was in middle school, I had
Mhm.
home economics, how to
Oh, that's
wash
great.
clothes, how to do dishes. I had wood shop, metal shop. I had photography class. I had architecture class, middle school.
Yeah.
Computer science. Like I don't know what it was called at the time, but we were on our little Texas Instrument, 56K, whatever the heck they were, and that all got chucked, along the way.
Yeah.
And then it became, well, let's get everybody into college. Well, to get into college, you need to have this core. And
Yeah.
so we're going to grind towards it, right? But then you're basically taking the interesting parts off of the kids, unless they are a math person or an English person, then they
And they
can
love it.
thrive within that. So here's what's going to happen, in my opinion. You asked it earlier, like, is the trend changing? The answer is yes, because the return on investment for college isn't what it used to be. And employers are telling colleges, you're not turning out kids that are helping
Yeah.
us.
What we want.
So there's going to be enough pain and suffering where the colleges are going to be incentivized to change, and then it's going to be a domino effect down. But until the colleges change, the high schools almost can't change
Yeah. They're locked
because the
in.
high schools know what the game is.
Yeah.
And we go back to
And
what I talked about earlier, play the game.
yeah. And as you said, I mean, you being a teacher yourself, and definitely myself, when you don't know there's an alternative or you're within the system, it's very hard if somebody's like, well, let's throw all these rules out. Why don't you talk with your students and try to figure out, like, do they really enjoy reading Beowulf right now? Like,
Yeah.
it's too much of a jump, because I mean, there's fear, there's the control element, whether you know it or not, whether we know it or not. um it's such a jump, so that I think I guess what I'm saying is, we're in this weird state where sometimes I just want to shake people and be like, dude, you didn't even like this as a kid, to these parents. Why are you doing it on your own children? But at the same time, that's not how transformation works. It's not like, Oh,
No,
now I
no, no.
see all of the problems. So
Yeah, yeah.
so getting there is tough. And I can imagine once you were developing and seeing some of the problems, how did you deal with you might want to really shake things up and change things, but you're also within, a system that's been going for a long time. How did you deal with that?
Yeah, the look, the current head of school at Sage Hill actually led this initiative, and it's still ongoing as far as I know. I haven't been there in a couple of years, but there is a movement being led primarily by independent schools, private schools, around what is the measurement of success for kids, and it's really trying to get away from this traditional what everybody knows, 4.0 scale, honors classes, bump it up, and you're going to take these courses and graduate. And it's really trying to measure, you know, what is a well-rounded kid. So here's an example. If you're own a graphic art company and you put out media and press, more than likely there's very few colleges that are actually turning out kids that are really going to be really good at that. But what if a kid came to either college or to a job and actually had a portfolio that they would show you, this is my work, this is what I do, right? So it was really trying to get away from the transcripts as we know them, to have a transcript measure actual skills, achievements, accomplishments, etc. And I was trying to do the same thing. It's actually happening at the Tiger Woods Foundation. This is an after-school program. Kids are coming in there. They're already doing the ABCs at school, so great. But after school, what if we built things around what people are actually interested in? Okay, so give me 1 minute here. There's an organization called Find Your Grind. Check it out if you haven't. And they do this really cool thing where they really help you discover kind of what makes you tick. So I went through this, did some assessments, and it spits back out. It's an app based that I was here were my three categories. I'm going to see if I can remember them. One was I was an entertainer, which I thought was pretty funny. But if you're a teacher, that kind of strikes is true. The other one was I was an entrepreneur. Like that's kind of what makes me tick: building something, creating something, getting after it and doing those other things. And then the third one has escaped me right now, but it'll come back to me. And when I got that back, I'm like, yes, that's what I want to do in my life. I want to build things. I like to get out in front of people. Like this is great. Well, if you know those things at a certain age, could you build a portfolio around them that allowed you to pursue your passion, right? So this is different because oftentimes when people say passion, they're like, well, if I was pursuing my passion, I'd be playing basketball right now. I panned out, I got to college and those guys were better than me, right?
Yeah.
Really what my passion was being part of a team, being the life of the party, having some fun with it, and then building something, the team. Well, that was really my passion. Well, how many industries could I do that in? Thousands of them. So we're confusing kids. The passion's not skateboarding. The passion's not English. The passion's not. It's more of a life. They call it a lifestyle. Lifestyle, not sitting in a beach chair with my feet up. A lifestyle meaning like, and they have 16 categories, 16 different lifestyles that you could fall into. And then once you know that, well, then what should you be pursuing to build that, to live that life, right?
Yeah.
It's fascinating. It's a great way to approach it.
Yeah. So it seems,
And,
I
and
mean, again,
I
it
think that's
seems
going
like
to happen more and more.
and it seems like just a life approach, whether it's, these 16 things or something. But the point is like finding out what really drives you is important.
Yeah.
And I mean, there is no, I do not remember a class in high school where there was any element of finding what you're actually interested in and aiding you, right? Because that's not an easy thing to do particularly at a young age.
Yeah, it's not. And here I have them here just to give you an idea.
Mm,
an analyzer, a contributor, an entertainer. Oh, here's the other one I had. I was a healer,
yeah.
um, a leader, a competitor, a creator, entrepreneur, a humanitarian, a maker, a thrill seeker, connector, educator, explorer, innovator, or organizer.
Yeah.
And if you think about those things, like you go, okay, well, if I'm an organizer, like what things do I need to start building my portfolio around to show somebody that that's what I'm really skilled at? And that's
Yeah.
the kind of things I love doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's all going to depend on where you're trying to get a job. Because obviously, going to be a mechanic, they're going to be like, I really don't care about any of this. Can you fix the car? You know what I'm saying? So there's like there are those fields that you need the technical wherewithal, and then there's fields like Google where they're just like, we want solid people. I mean, they have some skills in this, but it's really solid individuals that we can help to develop. Um, but yeah, I think that stepping back, it's really just that maybe it's a transformation of us people before you can transform the high schools. Because I don't think
Yeah.
if the parents don't change, there. I mean, you were saying the demands might be coming from I think the actual employers, uh, but at the end of the day, the parents are kind of controlling where their kids go. So it's just like it seems like there needs to be a real change in parental mindset.
Yeah. And that's not going to be easy. I think where the change
Yeah.
comes,
Mhm.
and this is really, unfortunate to talk about, is when there's something typically tragic that happens.
Yeah.
The kid's either really depressed. There's been, kids in the community that have made decisions that, might be suicide. It might be they're cutting. It might be, and that ends up being the wake up call to my kid's not fulfilled.
Yeah.
And if you really think about it, when that you have a 10-month-old, so when that little guy came out and you looked at him, most parents don't go, God, I hope he's an engineer.
Yeah.
They go, oh my God, man, I hope this kid is just connected, has friends, lives a good life,
Exactly.
right? And
Yeah.
then if you ever want evidence, so I have 5 kids I mentioned earlier, and 3 of them ended up going to Sage Hill, right?
Uh,
And the first day of school, do you think I'm worried about their teacher? Do you think I'm worried about what homework they have? Do you think I'm worried about if they have their supplies?
yeah.
No. I'm peeking out my window and I'm hoping that Gordon Jr. is sitting at a lunch table hanging out with other kids.
Enjoying. Yeah, and
That
I
was
should
my
say
biggest fear.
that he's not going to be. Yeah, and it's interesting because I should say, I mean, Gordon, because I had a lot of students actually go to Sage, or a few students, I should say, relative to the number of students that we had at our school, a lot of students, but
Yeah.
overall, few students. And again, I think I told you this before. It was the only school that I consistently got students saying, "Man, I'm so happy I'm at Sage," because the rest of them were like, "Oh, like we're not learning anything. It's boring. I don't like my teacher." It was just such a because at Laporte where I was teaching early on, although it was more relatively traditional, we were super engaged with kids, as you were saying, like that kind of dialogue back and forth. It was just a very family like environment. And then they went into the system, and
Yeah.
the system just teaches at you as a child.
Yeah.
So
Sage Hill wasn't perfect. What we did really
yeah,
well was the family.
yeah,
Like,
and that and
when
it
those kids
matters.
showed up on campus, I was talking to the older kids. I'm like, look, your job today is to find that kid who's sitting by himself and invite him to your table. That's
Yeah,
your job.
relationship, right?
Build it.
So
And then the teachers
yeah.
were affable and approachable and accessible
Oh
and,
yeah.
held standards, don't get me wrong, but more like a player's coach, they wanted to be engaged with the kid, and
Yeah.
then that alone will take kids up a notch.
Yeah, no,
Then
it
then
will.
it becomes the curriculum, like, what are you doing? And then the fine tuning around that. And that, look, Sage, no school has solved that. It's hard to be perfect for everybody.
Yeah.
Every kid's different. You do your best and you keep adjusting. And your Sage Hill is playing a game like everybody else, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And for now, that's probably the way it has to be until there's more change in society.
Yeah. Yep. Well, Gordon, man, it's been nice having you on. Is there anything you want to share with them? I mean, I can't wait to see. I imagine this episode will not. I'll just be direct with you. Anybody I've had on that's not Montessori, I was telling you earlier, I had some random guy. I love this guy, but it's like not as many Montessorians want to listen. And I'm trying to kind of branch out and get people from outside of the bubble to just hear what, the world's like outside of Montessori. 'Cause people get, like anything, left, right in America, you get trapped in your bubble, and the other side is, you know, the devil. And
Yeah.
and in a sense, you never even, if you're in that bubble, you don't even know what the other side is like because you've been so
Yeah.
in your bubble. So
You don't know.
is there anything you want to share, whether it's with Montessori parents or just general parents, really,
Yeah.
that kind of you've experienced over the years, just being around so many teenagers, and in a good way?
Yeah.
So
I'll hit it, like straight on. Like, I learned a lot about Montessori just in, talking to you over the last 6 weeks. So I started watching your podcast. I watched other things, and Montessori is doing it right. The knock on Montessori, if there's anything, is going to be this, which is, yeah, you go through that, and then to your point, there's not too many high schools that are Montessori high schools. So that kid's going to have a transition at some point, right? To kind of go, oh, I got to start playing this new game. You know, it's not a knock on Montessori. It's just a reality of a situation, right?
yeah.
Montessori does it right in the sense of, when I was watching those videos of those kids and the agency they showed, I was like, oh, that's so cool. And here's what I would tell parents. I have 5 kids, all very different, and they've all found success. Be careful with that word, in their own way. And the one thing my wife and I did really well is we exposed them to a lot of things and let them play with it. We let them, hey, once that thing's over, you don't have to go back to it. If you hated it, no problem, but finish it. So, make sure, that you don't like it. And we give them a lot of choice, but we had our kids from a young age, getting their shoes on. They had to put them over here, making their bed afterwards. Hey, help me make dinner. Why don't you prep this and start getting it out? Hey, we're going to go clean the backyard, get the rake out, do the work, and, they heat and hot at it at the time, but now they have those little skills and those little things and a little bit of confidence. So when they got to school, it wasn't only school that they were worried about. Like, they had other things in their life that they were exposed to. And many of them, like my daughter Grace, she does go to college now. She's studying communications and political science, but she got into that because she started working for an organization when she was 15, and she loved doing the communication social media component of it.
Yeah.
And so she would have never got that if she didn't get out there and take a job.
And work.
Let your kids work. Get them a fix-it job. They should be at the, the Denny's bussing, dishes, that teaches them something, anyway, that's how we've done it with our kids. So far, so good. They all seem happy.
That's good.
Yeah, moving along.
I don't know how many, I mean, like, I think some of what you're saying is, people think of Montessori as XYZ, but a lot of people will write me, Gordon, and they'll be like, I was raised this way, but we didn't call it Montessori. So you're doing a lot of things that are kind of Montessori-ish, with your kids. And these aren't some of the things in Montessori aren't revolutionary. I think there are things that are definitely revolutionary, but some of them, it's like,
there were some nuances where I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. Like, watch the kid, like, the way that the intentionality around watch them. A lot of parents are like, get your damn clothes on.
We're moving too quick. We're not actually seeing the child. It's because we've already got our image of what the child should be.
Patience is the tough one. As a father, like, I'm sitting there and my daughter wants to draw out the birthday card. I'm like, just, like, we got to go, but like, you got to build that time and to give her that time to do it. And that's how they're going to build that confidence. Right. But we're always in a hurry. So you nailed it there. Slow down.
Man, Gordon, you just got like an image of these classes that we had when, it's like an hour and it's like, you need to do this now. And it's like, okay, now move on to the next subject. That's like, damn, like, I just want to relax and do some of this. Like, I remember you gotta keep moving. You gotta keep pushing it. It's like, have some patience, let them do their thing. Yeah.
Well, that's where the shift has to happen, because that teacher is getting a state mandated curriculum. They've got to hit these 20 things before the end of the year.
And then there's stress, fear.
The teacher's stress. It's not that. Most teachers, their hands are tied. There's not much they can do. So the system's going to have to change. It's going to come. It's happening. but it's not, like you said, it's not that.
Yeah.
It's coming.
Yeah. Well, good stuff, Gordon. I like the
Yeah.
different things we've hopped through. We've been all over the place, but it's been good. I feel like, you know, it's like stop playing the game. I think that's
Well, yeah.
ultimately.
Either stop playing the game or find another game within the game. But
Yeah, yeah. Because it can't be
yeah,
sometimes it can't be overnight, as we've kind of gone through. It
yeah,
just doesn't
there
happen.
is a game being played, and if you get completely out of it, you can still be successful. Don't get me wrong, but there's a fear there, right? But is there a
Yeah.
game within a game? That's
Yeah.
what Sage Hill was trying to do. Here's the game, but there's another game within the game.
Yeah.
Let's
And I
let's
think
play
that's
that
good
as
for you. I
well.
mean, given that you work with so many teachers, do what you can to enjoy the time that you have and then allow the kids to have some joy. It doesn't mean you have to like change the system. That's me just wanting to be like, oh man, I want it done. I want it gone
Yeah.
tomorrow. But
Well,
anyways,
once you have that, give me a call. I'll join your team.
good stuff.
All
Well, cool
right.
deal, Gordon. Well, thank you again. Enjoy your time with. I know the kids are out of the house now, right? There's no more left in the house, or is there
No,
more?
three of them are out of the house. I still have a 15-year-old and an 8-year-old. So
Oh,
it
the
feels like,
8-year-old. That's right. The eight
yeah,
year old just jumped in.
it feels quiet. Let me just say that. But when you go
Oh
from
man.
5 to 2, it gets pretty quiet pretty quickly.
Wow, man, that just left my mind. The 8-year-old. That's crazy. All right. Well,
Yeah.
get to it, and I'll get to mine. I think he's sleep. My wife is wonderful at times when I need to do something like this. So,
Yeah, yeah.
cheers to the
Well,
wives in our lives.
enjoy yeah, exactly, and enjoy the ride. 10 months old, like precious times. So have fun
Yeah,
with
I
it.
keep hearing it. So, all right, brother. Well,
Yeah.
good talking again, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Jesse. Have a
All right.
good one.
Coming out of my conversation with Gordon, I only really want to highlight one thing, and that's something that he said. He was noting that when we first see our baby, when he or she is born, none of us are thinking like, oh God, I can't wait to see him as an engineer, or oh, my daughter's going to be a doctor. Look at this little doctor. No, like we're mainly just looking at our child, just wanting, I mean, just the very best in life for him or her. And I think we just have to really remember this, day in, day out, year in, year out, because it can be difficult. When we're looking at there's a report card. How are the grades? Or, is he going to get into the school I really want him to get into? Like we just get wrapped up in things that might not really be aiding this person's life. And that's how I kind of think about it is, I ask myself a question, am I aiding my child? And then, when I'm a teacher or working with children, these students in front of me, am I aiding their life, or am I, becoming an obstacle to it, which can be fairly easy to become an obstacle. Now answering that question is not always easy, but man, we gotta keep it in mind. So just another big thanks to Gordon McNeill for coming on and reminding us of all of this. And as he basically says, for all of us, young and old, we got to stop playing the game, or at least change some of the rules here and there. So if you've enjoyed our conversation today, please share it with someone else you think might appreciate it. And if you're not yet subscribed to the Montessori Education Podcast with me, Jesse McCarthy, get on it, please. And the same for our YouTube channel. Get on that. I mean, there's video over there. In this case, with Gordon and my own are pretty faces. So that's it. Thanks, everyone. Always a pleasure being with you. Talk soon, and adios for now.